Good. All right. So, hello. My name is Kaylee Kipe, and I am an owner and the lead business consultant and project manager at Odoo. We are a gold partner located in the United States in the greater Seattle, Washington area. So, is anybody in here in HR or involved in the hiring and recruiting process? Yes. And some quasi. Okay, perfect. So, our job here today is to make your lives easier. We want to decrease the amount of time it takes to do some of the more mundane tasks that can be automated, like weeding through candidates that are applying to your positions that may or may not be super invested in working with your company. So if you attended the keynote or have seen the keynote, Fabian had a slide that was talking about how referrals from existing employees are your best bet for hiring candidates, and that's 100% true. But on the same slide, we saw that a large number of your actual candidates come from things like job posting sites. Very few of those people are actually hired. And one of the reasons for that is you'll get a lot of candidates through those sites that are really just applying to any position. They may not be invested in the position you're offering or in your company. They're just trying to apply to those. So we want to kind of move through those candidates and just find the qualified ones. And then beyond that, once we have found our good candidates, we want to make it easier to onboard them and ultimately want to keep those employees once we have them. So the topic of our talk today is recruiting and retention with surveys and marketing automation in Odoo, and we'll be going through those items. And we are here to make your lives easier, so I'm not going to go back on that. But one of the things we also want to do and talk about is that recruiting and retaining employees is big money for the company, and so we need to be conscious of that when we're going through these processes. So how big of money is this? Recruiting cost per hire, or CPH, is a combination of your internal and external recruiting costs. So this could be advertising for your position, external recruiting agencies, the time and salary of you guys who are actually hiring employees, and you divide that by your number of hires. And that comes out average in the US to about $3,000 to $4,000 per hire. So not an insane amount of money, but something to be aware of as you are recruiting is that this is money that's going into this process. But beyond that, there's the cost to onboard an employee. So it's estimated that the average cost to onboard an employee is 1.5 to 3 times the employee's actual salary. So you have things in here that companies do account for, right? You have the employee salary, that's a given. Most companies also account for the benefits, the time off, the workstation for the employees. But a lot of companies don't think about the actual time component of this. So there's not just the time of the employee to onboard them and bring them up to speed and make them a productive employee in your company, but there's also the cost of the people that are hiring them and helping train those employees. So overall, with the cost of hiring and then 1.5 to 3 times the person's salary just to onboard them, you really want to keep that employee as well. Also, we like our employees, so we want to keep them for that reason too. So towards the end of the talk, we will touch on an Odoo Suite module that we have called Payroll gamification, and we'll talk about how that can play into retaining your employees over time. So if we hop on over here into Odoo, we can go ahead and get into recruitment, and we're hiring for a support assistant here. So let's edit this role and see what we have going on. So in the support assistant role, we have an interview form. It is worth noting that to use interview forms, which are surveys in Odoo, you do need to set that in your configuration for recruiting. There's just a checkbox, say you want to use interview forms. So once you have that, you can set up a survey that you would like to provide to candidates as part of the interview process or the candidate process. And if we look at the survey that we have here, wait a second while it loads. Okay, so first we start off by telling the candidate what we're doing. We're hiring for a support role, so in this case, we want to see how they interact with software, how flexible they are, how quickly they can pick up on some new processes and follow directions. And we want it to be a relatively short survey. It should only take about 10 minutes because we want to be respectful of the candidate's time. And while we do want to ensure they're engaging with our company, we also, we don't want to send them a 2-hour project just to get them through the gate. So we start by having them log in to an Odoo database. We ask them some qualifying information about who they are. And then we just have them take a few steps, right? Make a sale order, follow these instructions, include a link to the sale order you created, to the ticket you created, etc. And then at the end, we ask them a few more questions. Why are they interested in this role? Anything else they want you to know? Some people will get really creative in this stuff, which is fun to see. And then what's your desired salary for the position? So again, this isn't something you have to ask, and it's not necessarily anything that would prevent you from working with a potential candidate, but it is kind of nice to know, because if you find that there's a really big gap between what you're offering and what this candidate expects to make, then at least you know going into that conversation if you're going to be able to close that gap. So you'll see in this survey, we didn't ask questions about their level of education or the benefits that they like the most, because we can get the former from a resume and we can get the latter in a conversation later down the line. Right now, we just need to know if they are actually wanting the position we're offering or if they're just applying to any position they can get their hands on. So then we'll go back in here and we'll take a look at some of the applications that we have. So if we look at this application, I just want to point out survey URL. This is a field that we added, not through a module or anything. This was just added through the Odoo UI by getting into debug mode. So go to HR applicant model, add a new field, and then put it in the form view. The purpose of this, as we'll see later, is we're going to generate a survey URL, and we want a place to store it, because we need to reference this variable in an email when we send it to the candidate. So that's the only real modification that we're making here as part of this, this discussion. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the marketing automation campaign that we have set up. So it's applied to the target model of applicant, because that's where we're starting from. And we start by generating an applicant survey URL. So one thing you'll note is that the domain is set to 6. That's the stage ID. And this database, stage ID of 6, is new. It's the first stage in our role that we're hiring for. So every new application that comes in is going into stage ID 6, and that's all we care about for this piece of the marketing automation. And this is a server action, so we can take a look at what this does. So we're executing Python code. We start by beginning a survey. So when you create a survey, you have to actually start or initiate a survey instance to get a response token that you can then use to send out a unique survey URL to every applicant. So that's not something that's just going to happen. We have to initiate a survey before we can go any further. So we have that response token. Once we have that, we are going to update our field that we added. We're going to take the public URL of the survey, and then we're going to take that response ID. And what that gives us is a fully qualified URL that we can send to our candidates to fill out the assessment or the survey. And then right down here, if you're wondering what this is essentially Odoo will auto vacuum the survey responses every once in a while. So in order to keep that live for an extended period of time, that response token, we have to modify the type of the type of response it is to keep it live. Otherwise, your survey will expire, and you don't want that happening. So we want to give our applicants time to actually fill this out. Next up, an hour later, we're going to send an assessment email. Again, we're just looking at stage ID 6, and this is using just the standard email template stuff that you will get out of marketing automation. So if we look at this, we'll see we have variables in here. So I only have one marketing automation, and we let this apply to every role that we post. And the reason we can do that is every role can have its own survey. And if you use variables in your emails, then it's very extensible. There's no reason that you have to start a new marketing automation campaign for every single role you hire, though you certainly can. So that's something to consider. You can do that, or you can just consolidate it, keep it in one, keep it really easy to manage. So we thank them for applying for this specific role, and then we tell them a little bit of information about the survey they're going to take, and we ask them to complete it within 7 days. So we're going to put a time component on this. The reason being is we want them to feel like they do need to take this survey to move forward, because they do. We're trying to get them to engage, and we don't want to leave this too open-ended. Otherwise, a month from now, somebody might come and complete the survey and then wonder why, they're not being considered for the role, and you may already have people all the way through the process or even hired at that point. And then we use the variable of the survey URL on the applicant to put this link in here, so that way they have their unique URL to go and take the survey. After that, we use a server action to move them to the assessment stage. So we want to move them through our stages so we can easily visually tell where every candidate is. This is a server action, but a very simple one. So no Python, we're just going to update the record. All we do is we target the stage, and then we set it to the ID of the stage that we want to move them to. In this case, 7 is the ID of our assessment stage. If you're ever unsure where you get IDs, you get them right up here from your URL. So you'll see the ID of the record that you're on, and that's where we're getting these stage IDs. Now, 7 days later, we're going to check their assessment. And this is where we get into a more complicated server action. We're only targeting those in stage 7 at this point, which is our assessment stage. We don't want to be checking the assessments for new candidates who haven't received it yet. So we're just looking at this one. All right, so let's break down what this does. So we're looking at the candidate's specific response ID for their survey. And we're looking at the state of their survey responses. So if the state is new, they haven't started the survey, or they've skipped answers on the survey, then they haven't followed the instructions that we sent them. And for that reason, we are going to write them to stage ID 9, which is the rejected state. So we are automatically moving the candidates that are not following the instructions or have not completed the survey to rejected. If they have followed the instructions, the only other state is complete or done, and it's displayed as complete. So if they have completed the survey, then we're going to write them to stage ID 8, which is assessment completed. Then we're going to make an activity. So we have the visual indicator, and we can group by the stages and everything like that. So we could easily tell that they have completed their assessment, but we want to take it one step further and provide an activity for whoever's responsible for this role to actually follow up with this candidate. So to do that, we're going to set this summary. What is this for? So it's a review assessment for partner name or the applicant name, application name. The application name is required. So you will always have an application name. The applicant name is not. The reason we prefer to use the applicant name is because it's more likely to be the user's name versus the application name might be their name and then like the job site they applied from. So we want to use the applicant name, but if we don't have it, then we'll just use the application name. We're going to assign this activity to the HR responsible on the candidate. For every candidate, that's inherited from the position. So if the role has an HR responsible, every candidate that comes in will be set to that person who's responsible, but people can change it. So we're going to set the activity for whoever's responsible for that candidate. And then this last one here, what we're doing is we created an activity, but it's out in the ether. It doesn't have anywhere to go yet. So what we do here is we say on HR recruitment, we're going to, on our HR applicant, that's where we are going to put this activity. So this runs 7 days after they receive the email telling them to complete the assessment. And then sadly, if they did not follow instructions or complete the assessment, we move them to the rejection stage, but we should also communicate this to the candidate. We want to keep them informed. If they're no longer in the running, we should tell them that they're no longer in the running. So this one's looking at the stage ID for the rejected stage. And if we look at this, we're just going to use their name. We're going to thank them for applying for our position. And then we're just going to tell them that we have decided to move forward with other candidates. But if they're interested in a future role that we offer, they should feel free to apply to that. So let's actually see this in action. We can launch a test here. we do this, we will select the person that we want to run this on. We're going to run this on Jean Doe. And when we save this, we're going to get the first piece of our marketing automation. And we will keep in mind this is actually going to run. So it's like a test, but it is going to run. So we can see this in action. So I'm going to open our applicant over here. We see he is in the new stage. We don't have a survey URL yet. We click this play button. It's going to close our modal. That's okay. We can go over here and we can see the rest of this play out. And if we look at Jean, we have a survey URL that's been generated. We can play the next piece. Now we're going to send him the email letting him know, hey, please fill this out in order to move forward. And we see that email down here. This is coming from Odoo. You can override this to be from the HR responsible, from a certain person in your company, etc. Want to move them to the assessment stage. And then we want to see what would happen if Jean actually completes the survey. So let's complete the survey. I'm just going to move through this quickly, so I'm going to put X's in here. If a candidate does just fill it out with X's, it probably makes your decision pretty easy, so they will likely not do this, but we're going to do it for the sake of getting through the discussion. Okay, so we've done that, and we can check our assessment. Because we did complete our assessment, or this response ID has a stage of complete or state of complete, we've been moved into the assessment completed stage. And if we scroll down, I now have, because I am the responsible party, I now have a activity to follow up, review his assessment to make sure he didn't put just X's and everything, and then follow up accordingly. So you'll see that this send rejected email is still here. We wouldn't want to have him complete his survey and then also send him a rejection email. So rest assured that when we trigger that, it's going to discard him because he doesn't meet the criteria, which is being in the rejected stage. So he won't also get that email. So we'll follow up with Jean, and we'll say that we're moving him through the interview process, and we would like to offer him a position. So at this point, we're done with the marketing automation piece, and we're going to send an offer letter over to Jean. One of the things to note is that Fabian was calling out that they do use Sign for onboarding. 100% agree with that, and that's what we're going to cover right here. And then in 13, they have the onboarding plan to schedule a template of activities to complete the onboarding for your employees. So I would definitely recommend that if you're going to be in 13. For now, we're just going to cover the Sign portion, how to easily send out offer letters and other forms. So we're looking at the offer letter right here. If we go into edit, but keep in mind, there are likely a lot of forms that your employees need to fill out. Their employee handbook, tax forms, non-disclosures, and things like that. And that can all be done through the Sign app. So not sure if everybody's familiar with Sign, but essentially we have this PDF. We can fill in some details about the offer that we're giving them. But the magic I kind of want to show up here is this folder and tags. So when this is signed, this is going to automatically go into our documents folder of HR and have the tag of offer letter applied. So we're going to keep everything really organized. So company is going to be me, and the employee is going to be my applicant that I do not see here. Yeah. Yep. Ah. Okay. And one thing, the file name is going to be the name of the file. We should add the employee's name here so we have some reference for who this is for. We're going to quickly sign it. Again, we're just going to throw some X's in here. All right. And if we go out, we can sign as Jean too, because we want to see what happens when all the parties have signed this. To do this, I'm just going to get into debug and then go into emails, and I'm going to see the unique link that was sent to Jean. I'm going to get into a private window really quickly and fill this out. Very nice signature, and Jean, as referenced by his survey, really likes X's as well. Okay. So once we have done that, we can go into our documents folder, look in our HR tab, use our offer letters, and we can see that we have essentially organized the offer letter for Jean, and we can do this with all of our employees and with all of the forms that they need to fill out as part of the onboarding process. So now that we've talked about that, let's briefly talk about retaining those employees. Like we said, we like them. It also was a lot of time and energy and money to hire them and bring them on board. So employees stay with companies for a lot of reasons. They stay because of the benefits, because they like the company, their coworkers, because they feel listened to, which, by the way, is another great use for surveys, is to check in with your employees occasionally. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of admit to ourselves that employees also stay with the company because of the pay, and because they get raises when they have accomplished goals that are good for the company. So a lot of companies will do an annual or a 6-month review in which they will send out an appraisal or a series of questions an employee needs to fill out. When the employee fills out that questionnaire, oftentimes their goal is to make a list of all the amazing things they've done. One, because they want to be recognized for it verbally, but two, because they're trying to make a case for why they deserve a raise. And then it's kind of a game of cat and also cat, because the employee is there to get a raise, and the manager is there not necessarily to not give a raise, but they also have other things to consider. They have budgets. They might have to run it up the flagpole. They have to make sure that it's very fair and all that other stuff. So at EBOO, we ask the question of, why wait until the end of the year, have this big conversation, have people really try to justify why they deserve a raise? What if we kind of created a list of milestones and accomplishments, things that the employee was doing that were good for the company or showed growth for the employee, and we give them raises as they accomplish these goals. So instead of an end of year kind of big bump and raise, throughout the year they're getting these small micro raises and getting instant validation for the work that they're doing. So to do that, we wrote a module called Payroll Gamification. And it layers on top of Odoo's gamification app. So I don't have time to go into all of gamification, but badges are essentially a part of gamification. You can grant them out to individuals. I would recommend that, because this is payroll related, that you only have authorized users that can give payroll raises allowed to grant these badges. And if we scroll down here to payroll type, we have 3 options. None. If this badge is granted to an employee, they will not get a raise. Fixed. If granted to an employee, then this payroll amount right here will be added to every pay period that happens after they're granted the badge or granted in pay period. They'll be given this bump a single time in the pay period in which they were granted the badge, or as many times you can grant the badge repeatedly if needed. So we're going to set this to fixed. In this case, it's implemented a project. So if Jean has implemented a project, we have to, my bad. Let's make that employee really fast. We're just gonna do the basics here, which means that we need to assign him a user. And I'm also going to set up a contract really fast because we're talking about payroll that does require a contract for the employee. So we might as well do it, and then we'll grant that badge. Okay, so I'm only gonna put the very basics in here to run payroll, which means you need a salary structure. Quick call out, you does the US federal and state localizations in the United States. We're just gonna select USA employee. In reality, you'd probably select an actual state, and we need to give him a salary. We also need to put this contract into the running state. If it's not in the running state, it cannot be discovered when you're creating a payslip. So let's go back to our badges. We're going to grant this to Jean. We can include a description of why they're getting it, but they will get an email letting them know that they received that badge. And now we can go and run a payslip for Jean. We see our structure, and we immediately see this other inputs line for the sum of all of the badges that this employee has been given. So it happens automatically. And if we compute this sheet, then we can see in the salary computation that we have a line for badges. Again, it's the sum of all their badges as part of the basic category because it is a taxable wage. So just like that, you're recognizing your employees in real time for their accomplishments, providing those raises on every pay slip that they get, instead of waiting for kind of an end of year review. That's all I've got. Any questions? Yes.
The survey URL. Survey URL.
The survey URL?
URL. Where can fetch it from?
Oh, the survey URL itself. So if you go into the survey, if you click share and invite by email, this is where you're going to get just the basic URL.
In the view?
Putting it in the view. So we put it in the view by going to, just hop in here. Technical.
Template?
Yeah, in fields.
Okay.
So X survey URL, right? So it's really basic. It's just a field name. The X comes automatically because you're adding it through the UI. We just put survey URL and applied it to the applicant. And then the magic of combining the base survey URL and their specific response ID comes from that server action that we created. Any other questions? All right, then thank you for attending the talk.